Greetings, Zimbabwe, Africa, and the world. Welcome to In Conversation with Trevor, brought to you by Titan Law. I go beyond the headlines and beyond the sensational. Today, I'm in conversation with the Chief Executive of CIMAS Medical Aid Society, Mr. Vulindlela Ndlovu. Greetings, Mr. Ndlovu, and welcome to In Conversation with Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor.
We're grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start from you are a chartered accountant, a former partner at KPMG. You are an ex-banker and also dabbled in private equity. How is the transition from banking, private equity, into running a medical aid society?
Yeah, I think the advantage was that obviously I'd worked in different sectors, including publishing, by the way, part of my career.
Right.
So, but the thing with health is that it's something that touches us every day, whether it's through childbirth or through parents or yourself, even as when you're young and as you get older. So there's always that curiosity. It's almost like the hotel industry. We all kind of think we know what goes on in there. But it was curiosity.
What has been the biggest surprise for you from the move?
I think the main thing has been that just to understand the depth of it and also to realize what kind of an opportunity it is, particularly for our country, and interacting with various people, usually really very brainy people doing great things. I think for me that has been
interesting. I've spent some time looking at your 2017, 2018, 2019 financials. And I see growth in revenues and growth in membership, which is a commendable progress given the kind of environment that we are in right now. Can you unpack for us what has contributed to that growth, both in membership and in your revenues?
Okay. I think even since that year end was December 2018, there has been further growth in our numbers, in membership numbers. I think end of 2018 we were on something like 197, 98, but we're now well over 200, wow. 207.
Congratulations.
I think it's awareness of the brand in the market, but also I'm starting to think that as things get difficult in our economy, people start wanting something, a safe place to be in.
Let's talk now about the current doctors' strike. Do you have a view as the leader of one of the biggest medical aid societies? What impact is that had in your service provision and in your to your members and generally to the health delivery system in the country?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, I look at it maybe from a continental point of view and from developing countries. The challenges that we face are quite common in the developing countries. And we know the current dispute is about remuneration. And in Africa generally, there are challenges in terms of remuneration. I was looking at some study that was done last year about remuneration across Africa. Around us, you're talking $1,500 US for the doctor. You're talking about your Malawi, your Lesotho's, Swaziland, and countries like that. South Africa a bit higher, maybe 3.4. That's in US dollars. But the rest of the continent, the figures are really shocking. The likes of Nigeria, under $500 a month, and so on and so forth. So for me, that is worrying because it means that as a continent, we don't retain those skills. And what it calls for is, I think, all of us in the industry as leadership to look for solutions to make sure that we progress in terms of health.
So Nigeria, $500 US a month, and Zimbabwe, where does Zimbabwe stand?
Zimbabwe, I think we all know the figures, and now a bit difficult because of the movement of the currency. So it would be misleading for me to quote any figure at this point. But you know, when things were stable in dollarization, I think we're stacking up more or less where the other SADC countries are, around about 1.2, 1.5. But there are also countries that you'd have expected better, like Egypt. Egypt has got one of the lowest on the continent.
What could that number be?
It's pretty low, under 500 actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, I think we need as industry leaders to start looking for solutions to solve that.
What could be the solutions to solving that?
I think it's more mainly getting our governments to invest more in health. Like, for example, if you look at Zimbabwe, in fact, as Africa, we've been guided by the Abuja Declaration.
Yes.
15% of our budget allocations should go to health. But in the recent years, we seem to be going up and up. But, you know, with the recent budget reallocation early this year, we're down to like 7%.
Which is unacceptable.
Yeah. So I think it's encouraging us to actually put more money in health as a country, as a nation. Some of it will come from our own pockets, because when we talk about medical aids, it's people actually deciding that I want to save for my health. So it's bringing that awareness, because if we can't raise that money, be it in the private sector or public sector, then we won't retain those skills.
And as they say, a nation that can't take care of the health of its people is a dying nation. Right. Let's move to a related issue, which is the doctor-patient ratio, which is also raised by the current doctor strike. Where do we stand, and what would be the ideal place to be?
You see, even on that, we actually, despite that, we've actually upped our training of doctors in the last 4 decades. We're still quite a miserable proportion. For example, of all the doctors that we have, we're looking at 0.16 per thousand.
Yeah.
And the WHO requirement is 1 doctor per thousand. And we have got countries that have progressed this in the West, your likes of Germany, Netherlands, and the US. Those people are ranging from 2 to 4 per thousand. So it shows you the gap that we have. And it gets worse in the specialist disciplines, whereas Zimbabwe was something like 0.3 to 1,000. South Africa is not that much better at all. It's also 0.9 per thousand. And yet there are countries like Turkey and Chile who are already on, 0.09, not 0.9 for South Africa, and 0.03 for us.
For Zimbabwe.
Chile, you're talking 1 per thousand. These are specialists now. And you're also talking about Turkey, 1.2 per thousand. So we really have a long way to go.
And this is all because of the underinvestment by government into the health infrastructure and the training of doctors and nurses and that kind of stuff.
But I would also think the brain drain from our continent into those places. Right. There are a lot of African doctors that are practicing in Canada, Europe, Australia, and so on and so forth. You know.
But the linked to that is also the cost of medicine.
Yes.
And in our environment, this is worsened by the currency and what it is doing. What has been your experience in terms of your members and patients around the impact of forex and the cost of medicine on medical provision?
Yeah, the last 12 months has really been a testing for us, because we saw the cost of medicine going up drastically, mainly because we also import the bulk of our medicines. And again, it's something that's peculiar to our country. South Africa is in the same situation. We have our manufacturing capacity has been decimated, so we're importing everything. But in the case of our country, we also find that our buying is fragmented. So we're not able to negotiate in bulk. So there's many people importing and not getting the best prices, particularly with the majors.
So we're not taking advantage of bulk buying that would result in reduced prices.
No, we're not.
But the bottom line is we're not manufacturing. Why is that not happening?
I think in our case, it's something that we should really introspect, because if you think about it, 30, 40 years ago, we were doing some serious manufacturing in this country. It may not have been efficient, but you know the situation post-UDI. What we didn't do was actually invest and re-equip our industries. And I think in the long term, we really must be serious about looking at sectors like health, because we did have the competency before. And those are the sectors we should be looking for investment in. And it all starts with, if the public sector is not able to afford, then there is no customer, because health really is largely a public sector responsibility. So we need to get to a state whereby we can make sure that our public sector is well financed for a start, but also grow our private sector to complement the public sector.
And give people an option. Those that can afford private, go to private. Those that can go to public sector provided medical health. I've been looking at your report and looking at the growth of your business. I am led to believe that you must be commended for having taken advantage of the collapse in service delivery by the government. You've moved into spaces which are not traditional medical aid services. And I want us to talk about that right now, how you've aggressively moved into investing in the health sector. And if you could outline the sectors that you've invested in and the impact that you've had.
Okay. I think one of the advantages that we have, and maybe that some of us are fortunate in that we came into an organization with a very long history. We have to start with the history of the medical aid in this country. The first medical aid in this country came in 1933, and that was CMAS. Then CIMAS came in 1945. We were quite advanced in terms of what we're doing. If I tell you that South Africa started having, as much as they had medical aids before in terms of regulation, that only started like 1966. So we'd moved somewhat in terms of our medical aid services. But what then happened was that, first of all, talking about us going into service provision, our first foray into service provision was in 1985 when we bought medical laboratories. And that was at the bequest of the industry, when the then pathologists were immigrating and there was nobody with the capacity to take over the laboratory. That's how we first came in. So we've ran that laboratory since 1985. But then what happened?
So it's just one laboratory?
Well, it's expanded into about 8 laboratories countrywide, but it's certainly one of the largest in terms of market share in the country, and one of the first to be ISO accredited. But what then happened was that in 2003, we started having a problem in the country. That's when hyperinflation was coming up, when there was no agreement between the medical aid industry and the health service providers on the medical tariffs. And as inflation went, we found that our members had no places where they could access service, and particularly on the lower side of the scale. And hence our new clinics were born. And we then went into primary health care, which for me I think was a very good foresight on my predecessors, because primary health care is really the core of health. If you get that right, everything else follows.
And you now have 12 health clinics
we now have
all
12
across the country.
Health clinics countrywide. They also have in-house dispensaries, which by the way came in very handy at the crisis that we talked about last year, when things started getting out of control and medicines were not that available. And our members were able to access those medicines in those pharmacies, and are still doing that.
And dialysis units?
That also, yes. So giving the history, so that's the clinic started 2003. I should have maybe mentioned the dialysis, 1999. Same reason, when we found out that while the public sector had put up dialysis facilities, they were not enough, they were not adequate, and hence we put up Harare hemodialysis in 1991. It has really been a lifesaver to a lot of our members and a lot of our patients, some of whom have been on it for decades, and provides a very really high quality service.
Are there plans for a dialysis center in the southern region of the country?
Yes, we certainly have that in the plans, because there we have got patients sometimes who commute all the way there, as much as 1 or 2 others have opened up since then. But we really think it's necessary to spread our wings such that as many people have got access to the service. You're talking about the expansion. Not only did we have primary health care clinics, we also are into dental as well, and we're also into ambulances and air rescue. Ambulance is a very interesting one to talk about, because we noticed at some point that the ambulance services that were there were not coping. And you have heard that, that first hour is so critical, particularly in accidents. We have a long way to go, because really people should have an ambulance when they need it, particularly in the light of accidents. So we went into that sector. We're discovering a lot of things, and our ambulance service has been well received.
What are you discovering?
I think we're discovering that there are really gaps. Yeah, there are really gaps throughout the country, in remote areas, on our highways, and it's something which, as a country, we need to come up with a solution.
Is this an opportunity for CIMAS?
I think it's an opportunity for CIMAS, but it's also an opportunity for the public sector and those entrusted with our roads to rise to the occasion. Here I'm talking about the likes of Zinara. So I think we really need to do something about the highways.
On the dental side, how many dental clinics do you have at the moment?
Okay, so far we've got one, with another 2 planned in the next year or so, and that one is in Harare.
So that's interesting. You have gone in as a response, like I say, to government not providing the services. But you have in 2017, the government proposing the Medical Aid Society's Regulatory Authority Bill, which to me it looks like is going to punish you for all the creativity and the innovation that you've had going into places where government has not been able to invest in. And government is raising the issue of conflict of interest. You are arguing self-regulation. You are proposing that there be an ombudsman. This is obviously a dark cloud that hovers over what you're trying to do. What's your position on that?
I think first of all, we welcome regulation, any improved regulation. So far we've been regulated by the Ministry of Health in terms of the Medical Services Act and the Medical Regulations 2000. So yes, there is this debate around, and we know that there's the intention to bring the Medical Aid Regulatory Authority and the Regulatory Act. We welcome this because if you've got a strong regulatory environment, it means our business can grow undeterred. We can compete on equal footing as an industry. But more importantly, medical aid is about ability to pay and financial viability and all those things, good governance, which are things that as CIMAS we pride ourselves on. And anything that enhances those things for us is welcome. So it's something that is welcome, and for us that's the bigger picture. So when we talk about, when this talk of stopping medical aids from being in service provision comes, we just think it's an unnecessary distraction because for a variety of reasons. One is that we've been in medical aid. Okay, the often reason that's given is that there'll be a conflict of interest. So first of all, the regulations that I cited, the medical aid regulations, say you cannot direct a member to a particular facility. That's catered for there, But also if you look at the Competition Act, what does it say about competition? There's a lot of safeguards in there. And indeed, where you're found doing the wrong thing, that act will deal with you, So when we look at it, we say, but what are we talking about here? In substance, aren't we trying to actually entrench the same thing that we're trying to get rid of? Because we're now saying that service provision is the preserve of health practitioners only in a way. But is that not also creating a monopoly in that regard?
Anti-competitive practices.
It's anti-competitive, In fact, even the issue that we always talk about, that there's no common tariff between medical aids and service providers, it's also an outdated concept. People should not sit down and agree on prices. Yes, there could be a guide. That's my view about tariffs going forward. There could be a guide, but any prices should be a business-to-business relationship.
The issue of conflict, though, is one that, to me, appears might be legitimate, and that the industry might need to deal with that. What's your view on that? How does the industry address the concern that there might be conflict, that you might be directing some of your clients who you supply medical aid services to say, you go to a dental clinic, you go to a hospital, how do we take care of that? How do we give comfort to those that are pushing back against that?
Okay, for a start, like I mentioned, in terms of existing regulations, it's illegal to do that for a start. But also, it's not good business practice to actually say to somebody, join me, and if you join me, this is what you want. People want choice. And we as a business understand that people want choice. It's about customer experience. So when we put out these clinics and these facilities out there, they should just compete with what is in the market so that patients can choose where to go to or members can choose where to go to. So our view is that as long as you are not penalizing people from going to a particular provider over your own, then I don't see where the conflict really comes.
Okay.
You know?
Is there an attempt, you cite self-regulation, has there been an initiative by the industry to put in place a self-regulation mechanism to give comfort to the authorities that we can self-regulate and this is how we're going to go about it?
I think as the dialogue on the new regulatory bill comes, we've put this on the agenda to literally say, you know what, maybe let's strengthen our own self-regulation. There are industry bodies that look after medical aids and maybe not actively self-regulating, but there's room to strengthen that going forward.
How are you worried that this bill might become the law of the land?
I think for me, if it becomes the law of land, it will be a tragedy. Because, you know, if you look at the Zimbabwean economy, I really believe in this economy and I believe in the opportunities in this economy. And the way I understand it, earlier on we were talking about manufacturing for pharmaceuticals and so on and so forth. The future economy, the way I see it, is service-driven, you know, and we've got the ingredients for that in health, in education, you know, in tourism, all those low-hanging fruits for us. But I talk about health, you know. We've got very skilled people in the country. We've trained a lot of doctors, some of whom are abroad. All those people can be harnessed to come back here to really do great things to great benefit of the economy and even earn foreign currency. That's what we see. But now you stop medical aids from going into that. What are you trying to do? You know, for example, I'll tell you, in this crisis, in the last 12 months, most of our members have been accessing primary health care in our clinics. They've been accessing medicines in our clinics, you know, and I can say that of even the biggest medical aid in the country. We all know a situation where the biggest medical aid in the country has set up even more robust facilities, more extensive facilities, and how they are serving that membership. You know,
interesting.
They've got hospitals, you know, and today you've got a medical aid card, it's getting better now, but 2-3 months ago you have a problem, you walk into a private hospital, are you gonna get admitted? You know, and yet you can go to that facility owned by medical aid and get the assistance. In fact, we found out that in this crisis, we've been utilizing some of those facilities owned by other medical aid to actually relieve the pressure on our patients.
Would you have a split in terms of the ratio of members of the public who are not CIMAS members who are coming to utilize your services vis-a-vis the CIMAS members?
Oh, it's quite it's increasing. Our members, particularly, they use our facilities in the greatest majority.
Okay.
But we do have members that use, for example, in the laboratories, it's quite a huge split, almost like close to 50% in the laboratories.
Interesting.
But in our clinics, yes, it's predominantly our members
who are using your facilities.
Yeah.
Clearly there are opportunities, there are challenges. I want us to move now to what you consider to be the main challenges that are being faced by medical aid societies in the country.
Okay. I think the biggest thing at the moment is actually access to services, which comes from the issue of where members are facing significant shortfalls. And this arises from the fact that the cost of the services has gone up, sometimes in sympathy with the currency, particularly in the early days, in sympathy with the depreciation of the currency, while the contributions have not, you know. In the recent months or two, I'm talking about a month or two, yes, there's been a bit of pullback in terms of the extent of the increase of the costs, but there's still quite a discrepancy where maybe medical contributions have gone up 3 times, whereas the cost of service provision have gone up sometimes by as much as 10 times.
Wow.
Yeah. So that for me is the real challenge that we face at the moment. But also some of it comes when you look at pharmaceuticals, for example, because though the inputs are also foreign in those entities, or even the cost of running a hospital, to some extent there's quite a significant foreign component. And then we talk about the earlier problem that we talked about, that those are skills-based businesses, you know. So some people have got the skills and they will want their remuneration protected. And you'll see it mainly when you come to specialist disciplines, particularly retaining younger specialists in the country and the specialists that are in much in demand. It becomes a challenge. So even we as medical aid, we cannot stand up and point a finger at service providers and say, you are being unreasonable, you know, because at the end of the day, it's fair play, it's fair pay for them too, you know.
Tell me, how does this number compare to regional and international? The fact that only less than 10% of the population are covered by medical aid. How does that figure look like compared to the rest of the world?
Yeah, I think, like I said, in terms of in Africa, we really have challenges. Even next door in South Africa is not that much better either. It may be double our problem in percentage terms, but you know, the Sustainable Development Goals talk about universal health, universal well-being for all. You know, by 2030, you know, improving, giving people healthier lives by 2020, healthier living by 2030. They go on to a lot of issues, including the one that affects us is sub-goal 3.8, which talks about universal health coverage, including financial inclusion. In Africa, that continues to elude us.
We're far away from it.
We are far away from it. And it's down to the challenge that I mentioned earlier on, that one, even as individuals, we must start to invest in our health and to put aside money for our health, not to wait for the rainy day to come. But also, we must help our governments to actually put the things they need to put in place. You know, the issue of the National Health Insurance, which is topical now in South Africa, those are useful discussions to have. I know right now we've got other pressing needs, but again, let's take advantage of we as the private sector.
Is it on the table at the moment in Zim?
In Zim, it is on the table, but obviously we've got other more pressing needs. It's been on the table for a while.
Should it not be prioritized?
I think it should be prioritized in a holistic manner alongside everything else. We need economic stability for a start to be able to do that well.
Let's move to your discomforts with health service providers have made headlines. The fact that, you know, sometimes people with CIMAS card get turned away, and that kind of stuff. Can you outline to us exactly the kind of problems that you're having with health service providers?
Okay, yeah, I think for us, some of the problems are maybe, how should I put it, they're perceptions more than in reality. We are one of the largest medical aids in the country, probably the largest in the private sector. We've been around since 1945. The formula has been working in many years. It's only when we stopped having an agreed tariffs that the relationship didn't seem to be going too well. But, you know, we're not deterred by that. We're working very hard to improve that relationship, particularly the business-to-business relationship. But we're also working very hard because we understand that service providers are just as good as our customers. So,
and by service providers, we're talking about doctors?
Yes, and hospitals.
And hospitals.
Yes.
And who else?
It's doctors, hospitals, laboratories, ambulances, and the like. So for us, I think for us, we see them as our partners, contrary to the to the view that you have just cast. And I think for now, we think we enjoy cordial relationships with them. They could actually improve. A lot of them, believe it or not, they are taking our card, and they are increasingly taking it because we're reaching that understanding. You know, we also understand where they are coming from. Some of the pressures, those are the pressures of the economy. They also have to invest in their lives and to invest in their skills, and that needs money.
Okay, so you're finding each other somehow.
I think we're making really good progress. We're finding each other, and we're very optimistic about the future in that relationship.
Let's move now to there's a lot of talk about Zimbabweans going to India for medical tourism, to receive medical attention out there. How big is that, and what role does CIMAS play in that?
Yeah, you know, there are certain services that are not available in this country, like a lot of the cardio procedures, some of the cancer treatments. We've got things like even kidney transplants that we don't do here, liver transplants, and so on and so forth. India has advanced greatly, you know. Earlier on, I shared with you statistics of doctors per thousand.
Yeah.
India is at 1 per thousand.
Yeah.
You know, having come from pretty low base, they've trained doctors big time. But more importantly, they've trained super specialists. So since 2012, we've been sending patients to India, mainly for things which we used to send them to South Africa. Because South Africa, we found, is also an expensive destination. And yet in India, we found out that the outcomes are great. Also because they use this model of integrated healthcare where there's everything under one roof. They use more the group practice mentality where a number of specialists will come and look at the patient and assist each other that way. So for us, it's been a learning point, and we've been using it to advantage. But we've also been using it to learn, like I say, because we've learned how their hospitals are structured, how their health system is structured, and we think those are things that in the long run could be done.
And you'll be using that knowledge locally.
Yes,
okay.
We think those are things that could be done in the long run.
So India is cheaper than South Africa, even when you're adding airfares and hotel accommodation.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, South Africa, the problem is also the model that's being used there, where you go into a hospital, it's almost like a hotel, and then the specialist comes with his own bill.
Yes.
It's also the model that we used here. Whereas in India, the doctor is actually employed by the hospital, so you get one bill. Everything is done for you under one roof. In fact, I did visit in India in December and had first-hand experience of this in practice.
Tell me, on average, do you have numbers in a year, how many people you actually refer to India?
It's pretty small. We're talking about of the people that claim 2%.
It's 2%.
Yeah, of the people that claim.
Okay.
You know, so yeah, it's minute percentages, and more people have been going to South Africa in the years.
Okay.
You know, maybe for our size, you're talking about in the region of maybe 200-300 people at any point in time. Whereas in India, it's been a fraction of that, maybe a quarter of that.
This show loves young people, young women and young men venturing into business, being entrepreneurs. And I see you have a CIMAS Health Education Fund. Do you want to tell us what that is like? Okay. Who you're taking, how many young people you're taking, and in which areas?
Okay, that has been quite something pleasing within CIMAS. Over the years, initially we're supporting undergraduates, pharmacists, and scientists, as well as medical doctors at our medical school to do their undergraduate studies. And you'll see we helped tens of those, almost 30, 40 of them through that program. And then about 5-6 years ago, we took a decision that we will now start assisting postgraduate students.
Right.
So at this point in time, we've got about 15 or so people in various disciplines, where we found that there's shortages in the local in our local context. These have taken courses at the local university as well as outside Zimbabwe. One of the first that we sent was our hematologist, who now consults for us at our laboratory, also lectures at the varsity, but doing amazing things, looking at doing stem cell therapy, things that previously were sending to outside the country, and really destined for exciting times in the treatment of bone marrow diseases in this country. But we also, for example, one exciting thing, just yesterday I got an email from a neurologist that we sent to South Africa. he's going to be the second neurologist in the country.
Wow.
You know, in a country where we have NCDs to this extent, we only have got 2 neurologists. So for us, it's plugging those gaps, and we're excited about that. Yeah.
Tell me, the people watching, the young people watching the show all over the world in the diaspora, in Zimbabwe, on the continent, wanting to be part of this program, what do they have to do?
I think basically is contacting us, particularly where people are looking at super specialties that are not currently available in Zimbabwe or that are underrepresented. You know, we spoke about specialists. It's alarming some of the things that are there in terms of statistics, you know. 4 cardiologists, the whole country.
Let's dwell on that. Let's dwell on the specialists and specialty services. 4 cardiologists for the whole of the country?
Yeah, 4 cardiothoracic surgeons, you know. And so you can't even do, you know, the hard procedures that you need to do here. And mind you, when those super specialties also come, they need to be the support staff that they need, you know. So we're really quite thin on
what
specialists.
What other specialist areas?
I think it's right across all the specialist areas, the various surgery disciplines. Orthopedic surgeons, it's improving. You're talking about, I think, 14 or 15. Neurologists, you're talking about 16. But the areas that I have mentioned, oncologists, 10 to 12. But even in those areas, there's super specialties that people need to achieve.
How do we close?
Oh, there's a one that worries me most.
Yeah.
Pediatric surgeons. You know, 2 in the whole country.
Wow.
Yeah, pediatric surgeons. 2 in the whole country. And that's another area where we've been sending patients to India. Yeah, we need to plug that.
We need to. How do we plug that? Is it the private sector? Is it the public sector doing that? Is it a combination? What initiative would help us close that gap?
I think it's a combination. If the private sector can chip in the way that we've done, and I know that some of our fellow medical aides are also doing quite a lot in that area, it helps address the gap. But the private sector working with, the public sector and also with our universities, understanding that gap, but also having structures for those people to work when they've gained those super specialties. And that is where, for us, it's a tragedy if medical aids were to be stopped from service provision, because we've got our eye on those things to say, at least let's start to put up the super specialty facilities to address some of those areas.
Let's turn now to the problems that your members face, those that we've not highlighted. If you could just zero in on those.
Okay, the main thing that I touched on at the moment is access to service. And you're talking about the shortfalls, which is an area that I'm saying we're really exercising our minds about this. Unfortunately, it's one where we continuously have to go to our members to say we need to increase contributions, but not everybody can approve.
I'm sure you're not popular when it comes to that.
No, we can't be. We can't be. But we've got this mismatch of where the costs are there and the contributions are here. So trying to find each other with the service providers, but we also need to up our game in terms of what is the contribution for us to have a decent discussion. So that is a major issue, affordability, where people are finding the contributions are increasing drastically. But it's one way we ask people to say, you know what, this is in sympathy with what is happening in the economy, but it's also the ability for us to buy those services. So for us, we think that's the big thing at the moment. Availability of medicines. So far, we've been able to cater for our members through our dispensaries and our other partners in the pharmacies, but the stocks of medicines are going down. So sometimes people have to look more for the medicines. More so when you now need specialized treatment like chemotherapy for cancers, it becomes a real challenge. The cost is also not right. So we're looking at a situation where we need to maybe continue having a conversation with our members. It's also about where we need to take them for treatment outside the country now. It's things that we're not able to do because of that we're collecting in local currency. We've got no access to foreign currency. The currency itself is not stable. So we need to have more discussions and more options for our members in that regard.
You've done amazing stuff, like I've outlined, and you've outlined in terms of moving into areas where the government is not providing services. And hopefully this bill it becomes something that it doesn't kill the initiative that you come up with. Where do you want to see CIMAS in the next 5 years?
I think for us, for example, in the last 2-3 years, we've come up with our purpose is to inspire healthier communities by providing global standard health and wellness solutions. So we've moved from this concept where if you say CIMAS, you see a medical aid claim form. We're all about the total person, you know. Let's start about preventing you from getting ill, you know. Let's introduce those wellness programs, all the dimensions of wellness, you know, how you eat, emotional, you know, financial wellness, spiritual even, you know. Are you getting enough sleep? Maybe that is the issue, you know, to really ward off those non-communicable diseases. And where somebody has now been affected already, but let's help them manage that situation through the healthcare value chain. And that's where we've got managed care to do that. Where there's really a situation now, is now curative. This is where we also get involved, and where people, I think, traditionally knew us as getting involved. So for us, we're excited about getting involved at preventative stage, at the wellness, preaching the message of wellness, and making sure that people live longer, healthier lives. So for me, that is the exciting bit. But we also, health presents a lot of opportunities for us. The availability of technology, new treatments coming. You know, they talk about in cancer, treatment of cancer, genomics is there. You know, use of technology, artificial intelligence, all those things are there within our reach. We just need to invest more in those things. But also you talk about medical aid, the data that we have, how it can be used to improve outcomes for our clinicians, you know. But we're also spending a lot of time talking to our clinicians about this thing about improving the value to the patient. And value to us is about maximizing on the outcomes at minimum cost, or at reasonable cost. I can't say minimum because we're not about cheap. We're about paying what should be paid so that the clinician can deliver the goods. So maximizing value, so going more towards value-based healthcare, as opposed to the models that we're using in this country where we're just paying for a fee for service. Because I went to see a doctor, I must be paid. Because the knee operation was done, I must be paid. But what was the outcome? When did the guy go back to work? You know, so those are the discussions that for us we think will be very exciting going forward.
Exciting future.
Yeah.
How does this Chief Executive Officer of CIMAS relax?
I don't know if there's anything called relaxation. I don't know if there's anything called relaxation. I think it's really spending time with family. For me, that's the biggest thing. Our children grow up fast, and if you don't spend time with them, then so use as much of your leisure where you can travel, see the world, you know. For me, that is, I think, one of the biggest, but also find useful things to read, you know, be it online or books, you know.
Talking about books, what book are you reading?
I'm reading a very interesting book by a Zimbabwean people and culture expert called Regina Tendai. This has come off the press. It's called Hands Off, Sexual Harassment dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace. And for me, it was about really trying to understand what goes on, because sometimes we think we know, but we don't know. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable now and ask you, a lot of young people, you know, are always inspired by the stories that we tell, and we share our successes and our failures. Have you ever failed in anything at all?
Geez, I failed in a lot of things.
Is there one that you want to share?
I failed in a lot of things. Yeah, a lot of things that I thought I could attain, maybe did not attain. I was in fundraising, corporate finance, lots of initiatives where we put a lot of effort, you know, and things just came flat, you know. For example, there's a fund I promoted for many, many years, which was a Zimbabwe-focused fund, and spent a lot of time and money in it. But our environment simply didn't act.
It failed.
It failed because of the environment.
What did that do to you?
I think for me, I've learned to say, when you deal with failure, look for the next exciting thing to do. Because otherwise, if you let it consume you, then you have a problem. You know, I've also had a business that failed, by the way, also because of the environment.
Did that crush you?
I think it did in a way. It really hurt me a lot because I put a lot of money into it, and bang, the market conditions changed, and we lost a lot of money and savings as well. but also it's about you can carry on mopping for the rest of your life. But I think the thing is there are lessons out of all these things. Yeah.
Fascinating. The fact that you're sitting here in front of us as Chief Executive Officer of CIMAS, having failed before, it means that failure should never stop our goals.
Absolutely not.
Vuli, thank you so much for the opportunity for coming into in conversation with Trevor. We're so grateful, and I'm sure a lot of people at home and watching in the diaspora and all over the continent have been inspired. For those of you who've been watching, thank you so much for watching. We invite you to subscribe to In Conversation with Trevor on YouTube. We're on Facebook, so that you don't miss out on any of these fascinating conversations that we're having. If you subscribe, you'll get an alert every time we have a new program. This is a weekly program, and we look forward to you watching our next episode. Thank you very much, and goodbye.